Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another photo Mish Mash. This being broadcast live February 26, 2020. I got a pile of small lenses on the table. At least one of them is very exciting, and we'll talk a little bit about it. Plus that weird picture I found when I bought a used piece of gear from B&H Photo. And so much more today. Practical stuff like tips for getting it right in camera so that you're not spending hours post-processing. And we're going to get all that fantastic information and so much more from my good friends and co-hosts. Once again, I'm so lucky. This week, we'll start with Steve Scurich. Thanks for joining us.
Hi. Thanks for having me. It's good to, it's great to be back with all three of us on the line together. We talked about this after the show last week. I said, you know what? That was one of the more fun shows we've ever done. We need to try to do this whenever we can. So hopefully we get to do this more often.
I hope so. Thanks so much for joining us, Steve. You're a professional photographer now based in Cincinnati. You can follow him at links right down below this video.
Yep. And somebody a couple weeks ago called me an influencer. So apparently you should follow me now.
That's amazing. Wow.
I'm definitely not, but
you've influenced me, Steve.
and me.
Yeah.
I know the basic ingredients of a Manhattan now.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
I've taught you guys how to make a Manhattan. I don't know if that's the kind of influence we're looking for, but hey, yes, I could.
It works.
Keep up the title of influencer.
It's a certain mature influencer that the world needs right now.
Yeah.
That's right.
Well, that is true. I don't know if teaching you how to make a Manhattan. Well, no, actually, that probably would help a lot.
It might help. Yeah. It might help everybody to just chill out a little bit.
It helps the debates go down a little smoother.
Ooh, yeah.
I think we should do a debate like this sometime. The three of us, like, really get up in arms about issues.
Yeah.
Camera issues or political issues or all of the above or none of the above?
Just camera issues that are related to politics.
Toby can take the far right leaning.
Yeah.
Yes, as I sip my peaceful chai tea.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful.
Now, and I'd like to welcome, as has been talking, David Carr to the show again. David, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me once again. Sorry, I spoke prematurely.
It's not that kind of show. Clearly from the thumbnail.
Okay. What'd you say, Steve?
I said you completely talked out of turn.
I did.
Yeah. It's clear. If it isn't clear from the thumbnail, it should be clear from the first 30 seconds of the show that we have a bit of fun, but we do have a lot of great practical advice and information to share with you all over the course of the next hour-ish. I do have a little bit more of a hard out. We need to end close to 3, so I'll just apologize in advance to everybody.
Okay. So that's what time on the East Coast?
Well, like 55 minutes from now, Carr.
Okay. I'm from Georgia. We just got math last year.
We just got math. If you want to follow more of Carr, he doesn't post about math, but he does post fantastic shots, headshots, and travels with McKay Photography Academy. His Instagram is linked right down below, along with his podcast about photography. You recently sat down with, what was the most recent one published was
with Tanya Wilhelm, who I think it looks like she's on the board today.
But that one's not out yet, is it?
Yeah, it just released today.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I didn't see that. I listened yesterday was the last one I listened to.
Okay. Yeah, that one came out last Wednesday. I'm trying to release them every Wednesday.
Awesome.
Just to
compete. You're trying to compete with yourself on this show.
I am. Yeah, this is the day that I just, make my presence known in the world. So
good. Pick one, make it known.
That's right.
It is a good podcast. If you are a photographer, the most recent one I listened to really struck me as if you're a photographer trying to, kind of get started in the business of it, there was just a lot of good information and tips and kind of the part of the world part of the photography world I don't think a ton about, really kind of coverage of corporate events from that perspective. So a lot of great information in there. Folks should go listen. And as I said, it's linked right down below.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing that.
Sure.
And thank you guys. Any of you who are listening, who have listened, thank you. I am still learning the nuances of how to put a podcast together that keeps your attention. And that, we're talking about images. So it's kind of hard to imagine a podcast working when you're only able to talk about it. You're not able to actually show images. We can't review images on the podcast. So it's really more philosophical, and it's more about just hearing people's stories in photography. we don't get too technical, but I really enjoy it. It's a lot of fun.
Cool.
And I want to have you guys on individually. I'm going to try to find a way to do this remotely. I think the technology is there to do that now. So
cool. That sounds good. Be happy to. I think my contract states green M&Ms only though. So
okay.
You have to mail those to me.
I will.
Okay.
I've got them ready to go.
Okay.
And you can't see any of Toby's spreadsheets that he'll talk about on the show.
Clearly from Roger's post, I'm not the only one.
I know. God, that's frightening. My boy Roger. Jeez.
Yeah.
Is expected.
That does bring up something that I want to briefly address.
Sure.
That spreadsheet was mostly designed for me to find like the most lightweight and value-packed, feature-packed gear that I was going to take on a Thailand trip. I canceled that Thailand trip, not because of coronavirus, but because of Chris having a change of work situation. So we thought it best, as she's looking for a new job, not to be so far out of reach and out of touch as we would on that Thailand trip. So we're taking a shorter and much closer to home road trip starting tomorrow. So follow along on Instagram if you want to do that. And, some people, when they heard that, were like, "Oh, so sorry." It's totally fine. Don't worry about us having to cancel a vacation. That is not a big deal. I get to travel a little bit, so don't feel bad for me. I'm very excited about a road trip down along the Oregon coast into the Redwoods, which I have never been south of Portland and along the Redwoods or along the coast. So I'm very excited about that.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
That sounds should be good. Should be good. And, I think that's a good time to introduce one piece of gear that's definitely going along with me. Not all of this, but this was the new lens that Sony announced yesterday. This is the 20 millimeter f1.8 G, not GM. Cool. It's G. And, I'm constantly looking for a really good star lens. There are a lot of options. I'm pretty sure we've talked about it on the show before. I'm starting to not love shooting super, super wide for stars, or not feel like I need to, like 14. Steve, I think you and I were sharing that same thought the other day.
Yeah, we were talking about it on the Yellowstone trip. We were just talking about star lenses and, what's new that's come out and what do you recommend. And both of us, you made the mention that you found yourself shooting a little tighter than you used to in the past. And I totally agreed. I find myself doing the same thing. I've got a 14 millimeter 2.8 that is kind of my star lens. But I've been shooting more in that 16.5 range. Pretty happy with that. And then my 24 millimeter, I'm, really happy with that too.
16.5.
Well, yeah, sorry. I've got a 21 millimeter, but because of not crop factor, but the medium format factor.
There he goes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
there he goes.
Right.
Should we start a drinking game when Steve mentions the size of his sensor?
Interesting. Okay.
From 21 to 16.5.
Yeah. He couldn't just round up or down. He had to say 16.5. And then I'm like, what the?
Yeah.
It's stupid. I got it in my head right when I was researching and buying the lens and for real estate photography. And then it just rolls off the tongue that way.
It does. 16.5.
Always talking about my big sensor.
Next week, he's going to have a monocle. He'll have a monocle.
Do not have to go.
David Carr, I don't know if you have a strong opinion about astrophotography and focal length that you like or don't like.
Well, not necessarily. I will say, I have the Nikon 14 to 24 2.8, which is a killer lens. But I will say, oftentimes when I take that on one of these Mackay tours, I don't find myself shooting at 14 millimeters hardly for anything. It can make things look really far away. Obviously, the stars are far away. But if I'm shooting like landscapes with it makes things look almost like you kind of lose the grandeur. Yeah. And so I don't even think to use it for the nighttime stuff as much. If I do, I probably tend to be more like closer to 24 millimeters, but I do like having that leeway to where I can go back from 24 a little bit. But yeah, and as far as focal length, I do think it just depends on the scene. When we were in Joshua Tree last year, there was actually some pretty cool scenery that was making its way, even in the darkness, just through those long exposures, it was making its way to the sensor. So you got the trees and some of that kind of distortion to me looked pretty cool with the stars in the background. But yeah, I don't necessarily need to have a super wide lens to do that.
Yeah. I think, and for a long time I said I'm not a big fan of wide angles, especially for landscape. But honestly, I think part of that was my ignorance in using them. And also that I think they are still a little bit more limiting than people realize. You really have to have some good foreground subject stuff.
Right.
If you have that, then a wide angle can really be cool because it includes that plus a lot of the sky, or astrophotography, or daytime kind of as you're talking.
Right. I find myself using the wide angle more for my portraiture than you would think. I mean, it's not the kind of lens you don't put people on the sides of the frame with it because it stretches them all out. But you put somebody dead center, and if there's something with great perspective, it can be a really fantastic look. But it's such a quirky lens. I don't necessarily use it for a lot of the landscape stuff, not like I thought I would.
Yeah. Well, so all that discussion to say, 20 is really seeming like a sweet spot for me. I had my eyes for a while on Sony's 24 millimeter f1.4 G Master lens. I've shot with that. I took it to Alaska back in December. Timmy took it to Alaska a couple weeks ago, or a week or two ago. It is because f1.4 is so fast, and 24 on full frame is quite wide. But what I like about this is it's a little cheaper. It is a bit, noticeably smaller, which also I really, really like. Because if you're going to bring around a lens that, you're only going to use for one or two kinds of shots, then you don't want it to take up a huge amount of room in your bag. And in my early testing so far, mostly shooting brick walls, this thing is incredibly sharp.
Great.
Really, like stinking sharp. The comparison is right now that I'm using is the Tamron 20 millimeter f2.8. So we got this lens comes in at what, like 3 something? This lens is 9 something. So there's a big price difference, but holy moly, is there a big sharpness difference.
That's great.
Wide open and out at the corners as well.
That's cool. I've never shot a prime, like a wide angle prime. I've just never used one. So I'm a little bit intrigued.
Yeah.
Oh, they're awesome. Well, my 14 is a prime, and I've been shooting that for years. But my favorite star lens, I haven't tested some of the newer stuff, is that Sigma. Toby, I know you lent it to me a while ago.
The 14 1.8.
1.8.
Yeah.
And it's the 1.8 that I really like.
Yeah.
Doesn't Sigma make some other lenses that are 1.8 that are a little shorter?
They make the 20 f1.4, which I think is also really nice. But so if you're paying close attention, you'd be like,
big, heavy lens.
Yes, that's it. See, and that's the thing. That's where that is a great lens. If I had a full-time Sherpa, or I was only ever road tripping, I would own that lens just for stars.
Which is kind of weird for a prime, because usually my experience is that primes are a bit smaller and lighter. You have, you don't have moving glass elements and stuff. And but the Sigma, for whatever, it's that front end bulbous design that they've been using for their super wide stuff. They're just big, heavy lenses.
Yeah, to offer that fast an aperture, I think you end up really, really high up there with the size and the weight.
Yeah.
2 other quick lenses that are going along on this road trip. They're both APS-C lenses. Sigma has lent me the 56-1.4. Should be a really nice little portrait lens. And I have shot with this before for crop sensors, talking about star lenses. This is the 16-1.4. And I mean, look, it's so small, so little. Crop sensor, of course. That is a lovely, lovely star lens. It equates to about 24 millimeters on full frame as well. So, and then I just had sitting there also the 17-28 Tamron, which I'm still very happy with. And a firmware update has come out. If you remember my review, I like it a lot, but every once in a while in the Sony systems, focusing issues. They have a firmware update out that's supposed to address that. I haven't installed it or run it yet, so I don't know. I don't know. Okay. And then finally, I mentioned this last week. I still think this is a really, really nice APS-C camera. I mentioned it as probably being like one of the best APS-C mirrorlesses on the market. Man, then today, probably that has been superseded by the announcement of the XT4.
Yeah. And we talked about it last week. We knew that was coming. But it's, it's all the specs that we are anticipating. And I think our comment last week was, once the XT4 is announced, that might be the top dog for the APS-C camera to buy. And it's impressive looking. I was pretty excited to read about it.
Yep. I'm going to share the B&H window, and we're going to take a quick look at it. I really do think this looks quite nice for many people. It is the XT4. It's $1,700 without any lenses, about the same megapixel size. It does now have 5-axis image in-body image stabilization. It can do 4K at 60 frames per second. Slight updates to the autofocus system, a little bit faster. Redesigned shutter that's going to give it up to 15 frames per second. That's mechanical. And that's important because, again, when you hear these high numbers, a lot of these cameras can achieve, those are the electronic shutter, and that's often not great for faster action because you get a little bit of a slower readout across the sensor. And this looks good. And plus, we do have a really fast readout of the sensor as well. And of course, do we have a picture that shows it nicely? That fully articulated screen. None of these pictures show it.
No. You know what I like about it, though? I mean, I like this screen design. I know there's a little bit of stupid controversy going on out there about it. I have thought for years that Canon makes the best articulating screens. All the other ones just seem to be full of levers and screws and knobs or whatever, and they just I don't really hear about them breaking much, but this is just clean. You flip it out, you turn it around. It's good for vlogging. It's good for, you know, selfies, or if you've got a model you're shooting, you can flip around, show them. You don't have to walk behind the camera. But what I really think is cool, and it also protects the screen, what I think is cool is that you can fold it away the way this picture shows right now. And it's got this real analog sort of look to it, which
that's cool.
The whole camera itself with, you know, it's kind of an analog lover's digital camera.
That's cool.
Fuji's just owning it even more. I think they did a really nice job with that.
Well, I mean, for about $9,000 more, you can get that Leica that doesn't have a screen on it.
It has a very similar look, doesn't it?
Yeah, no screen.
Yeah, I know.
No, I that's actually really cool, Steve. I agree that, you know, I mean, there's sometimes that we're so reliant on the screen, and it's not that you don't have it, but if you know, there might be a situation where you just want to flip that thing backwards and be like, I don't want to look at the screen, or, you know, it protects the screen. At least that way, you know, if you're in a situation where you don't want to expose that screen to some, you know, to the elements or whatever, at least you can flip that thing around. It's a beautiful looking camera.
It's awesome.
It really is. You know, and let's you know, take a step back from saying how beautiful it is, though, and say that not huge changes from the XT3. These are pretty minor.
Yeah,
and
pretty similar.
And that's not really a knock against it. That's just kind of the realities of cameras these days. And the typical story is the next model is minor upgrades. Occasionally we get wowed with something that is pretty game changing, but usually they're pretty minor. Oh, I don't know if I mentioned IBIS. That actually is pretty big, up to 6.5 stops with some of Fuji's lenses. That is a significant stabilization for both stills, shooting at slower shutter speeds if you're not shooting moving subject, and even more importantly, video people, sorry. Then that should go along nicely with that flip out screen for a little bit more vlogging style. So this really is probably the best hybrid camera out there on the market now with all of these features.
Well, and also they replaced or they changed the battery. So the XT3, I think, was estimated to get somewhere between 200 to 300 shots per charge. And this one now gets 500 to 600. So you're almost doubling what you can, or you are doubling what you can shoot with the previous model. And you can charge the battery in camera with USB-C. So, you know, and that stuff's just all awesome. One of the things that just drives me a little crazy with the camera industry, though, is I know that the screens are looking better in terms of resolution, but they're nothing compared to our cell phones still.
Yeah, it's true.
Have been out forever. And this is why people take a shot on their cell phone. They're like, oh, it looks so much better on my cell phone than it does on the back of my camera. Well, yeah, it's super bright, and you got like, what, 10 million dots on your cell phone.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
I just don't understand why camera manufacturers can't make these super high resolution, you know, use OLED or something that doesn't suck up a lot of battery.
Yeah, I've never understood that either. I mean, we talked about this a little bit last week. I mean, there's certain technologies that they've been available for a long time.
Yeah.
And yet the camera manufacturers are still just not including them. And I mean, I guess it comes down to some sort of dollars and cents, the P counters or whatever. But like, I just, yeah, I mean, there are certain things like that. I just go like, why are we not there yet? You know, why? I mean, these are the things that would just, it would be like the shoe in on purchasing certain equipment is like those types of advancements, you know. And I don't think we need to rely so much, you know, obviously we would never teach, you know, our clients on the McKay tours to rely on the back of their screen as the full indication of what they shot, because a lot of times it literally is like a thumbnail of what they've got. But still, I mean, you're right. You look at your phone and it's kind of all there.
Yeah. And you know, that I didn't put this on the rundown, and you know, because it's a little bit out of our wheelhouse, but I do talk about phones every once in a while. Kind of related to this, Sony announced the new Xperia phones, including a development announcement of one with not a ton of details other than the fact it's going to accept HDMI in. That means that you can mount it to the back of your camera and use it as a screen. Definitely a little clunky, but that certainly is taking us towards that point of what you're talking about, Steve, of giving us a much better view with using something that we already kind of carry around in our pocket.
Yeah.
And the other interesting thing about that phone is a 5G chip inside, and really is going to be designed to not only show you what's going on from your camera, both photos and video, but also to be able to quickly and easily beam that to different devices. So live stream from your camera very, very easily. Maybe the future of tethering, since Lightroom sucks so much. I saw David Carr. I saw your post the other day. Yeah.
I mean, talk about a head drop. I just like got there. I was all ready. I had everything. I mean, I'm normally scrambling to get ready, and I got ready the night before. I had it all. Everything was ready to go in the car. Get there, set it up. I'm like, ugh. So I've got more headshots tomorrow. We're going to see how it goes. I did update Lightroom on my laptop. Maybe that will fix it. I guess I wasn't running the latest version. I thought I was, but well.
Yeah. Well, it's still, you know, this has been a problem that's plagued Lightroom for ages and ages. You would think
and
they would.
At least address it, but nope.
Right. I tried, so the other day, well, it's maybe been about 1 or 2 weeks ago now. I tried setting up a catalog just on my hard drive, and which I have nothing on my hard drive. Everything is external. And I set up a catalog there, and I imported my Maui photos into there, and I was working on them in Lightroom. These are not massive file sizes, and it was still, when I was doing some heavy lifting with, you know, brushing or graduate and erasing and stuff like that, it was still just chugging along and spinning. And the machine is super clean, extremely frustrating. I thought about just going to Bridge and Photoshop and using my own file system, because I've just been so frustrated with. Because more and more now, what I'm doing is I'm taking files into Photoshop a lot sooner than I used to with Lightroom.
Yeah, me too.
I don't do any of my graduate filters or any of that stuff in Lightroom anymore.
Really?
I do Photoshop, and I work through raw. It's so much better.
Just because of the speed.
Because of the speed. I take it in there, and everything just works a lot faster.
Well, I've had an interesting thing lately where, I mean, I shot a wedding last Saturday with my niece, and I had over 3,000 images as the second shooter, which was kind of a big deal. And I had no trouble. It was like, it felt like everything was trucking along really smoothly in Lightroom. I really took note of it, and I don't know what that was. But so I haven't had issues with that so much lately, but it was just that tethering thing. But I don't know. It just,
tethering, I don't have experience, but everybody talks about Capture One being basically the gold standard when it comes to tethering.
Yeah. Well, I was definitely thinking a lot about Capture One yesterday. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And Steve, I'll just add that lately I've been quite happy with Lightroom's speed. It hasn't been bad.
It's kind of been a newer thing. Just in the last few weeks, I don't remember doing any big updates. While it seemed to be getting better and better, but
something.
Yeah.
Check that graphic card setting and see what it's doing in there. See if it's got that check.
Yeah, it could be, because this is a newer machine and it's spec'd, you know, pretty up there. So no reason why it should be doing this.
Speaking of Lightroom, let's dive in. This is part of the show where you have submitted images to us. And that also reminds me that I'm a big dummy. I forgot to welcome the chat room to the show. Chat room, thank you so much for hanging out with us, giving us your thoughts and opinions about things. You truly do make the show a whole lot better. Most of you are PEN members. That is, you have joined the Photo Enthusiast Network. Thank you so much for your membership. If you're watching this and you're not part of that, there's a fantastic deal to join for 6 or 12 months. You get to submit images for the review of the show. And that's just actually a tiny, tiny piece of all of your membership benefits. If you go to photorec.tv/pen, it redirects to the fantastic Groupon deal. And from then you can get access, or you just go to photoenthusiastnetwork.com to find out all of the information, hundreds of hours of training videos, articles, new content every week, and access to professional photographers that give you opinions on your pictures, like we're about to do right now. I also forgot to talk about Squarespace. Save 10% off your Squarespace domain. I'm not a great advertiser. Sorry. We'll talk a little bit more about Squarespace later, maybe, if I feel like it. It is a good place, though. I again and again, there's just no errors on the back end. I just go in, I create my posts, I create the news articles, and it just all works. I'm just really, really happy in Squarespace, and I don't know why it took me so long to go ahead and start my own Squarespace website. I think part of it was I always heard that your web SEO may not be quite as good on Squarespace. And I've been doing a lot of reading and researching leading up to the switch, and it honestly isn't true. As long as you are working and putting up keywords and doing the same kind of content, you're going to rise up in the Google rankings just the same as you would on any other platform. So again, I've been very, very happy. And if you're looking in 2020 to make a website, Squarespace is a great place to do it. You can save 10% off your first purchase by going to squarespace.com/photorectv. Okay, we're going to share Lightroom. We're going to jump in. I actually have a couple more pictures than this. It is filtering to just the ones. There we go. Okay. And just a reminder, we're going to go through these fairly quickly because one, we've got a lot of them. And two, this is what this section of the show is designed to do. Kind of give you rapid, quick tips for some suggestions and things to do in Lightroom that make them stand out a little bit more. All right. First up, we've got Jeremy, this really cool mural. And a Mercedes.
So I'll chime in here. My first thought when I looked at this is I wish that Jeremy was standing about 10 feet over to the left, and either just including more of the cars that are in the scene or cutting them out altogether. I like the angle. I like the fact that he's shooting from really down low. And it looks really cool the way, the sidewalk kind of just goes on and on and on over on the left side. That stuff is very, very close to the edge of the frame. I would definitely clip out the little bit of branches and trees that are filling up that lighter space. And that lighter space to me is kind of part of the problem. It's taking my eyes away from the mural. And so are the noses of those cars. Really cool if they were, really cool, like timeless or vintage sort of cars that were parked there and you include a bunch of them. But there's just a little bit showing and not enough to be part of the story. They're just a distraction from the story. So,
I would agree.
Photoshop that out of there, but that's going to take a heck of a lot of work. And you need yourself, do I want to put that time and effort into?
I agree with you, Steve. One thing that I feel like you could do to this image is just crop it up and off the left. Like you said, just get rid of the white sky and just come in just to the mural, basically like below the hands of the woman in the mural. I mean, you could leave the building, I think, on the left, like the perspective of I think at least that way you're preserving some of the context of this was on a building and there was some perspective. But to me, the cars are kind of superfluous at this point because there's not enough of them. There's not enough of not enough cars, but there's not enough of the actual, each individual car. And so
I like that crop right there.
Sorry, I just coughed, but yeah, I mean, it creates there's like some geometry there that I like that on the left,
Yeah.
So
yeah, and I see some of the comments in the chat room about going black and white. It's a good suggestion. It's definitely one of those pictures. If it was mine, I would play around with, as stated, a high contrast black and white. I think that's a great way to go with this. But cropping it in like that and simplifying it, Toby and David, I think was a really good move. And I like the color a lot.
yeah.
When it's cropped in like that, because there's simplicity and there's a very clear understanding of what the story is, and I like the color of the mural on top of the red brick.
Yeah, and the windows that are bricked in. I mean, there's a lot of cool stuff happening there.
And you still get that sense of scale.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool.
Black and white is also a great suggestion.
Yeah, very nice. All right, thank you, Jeremy. And moving on from a big mural to little teeny sailboats. This is Sue Stevens. This just makes me think of Stuart Little and sailboat races. I don't know if any of you read that book as a kid.
So this is kind of a good photograph to look at with the message of odd versus even numbers. When I see this picture personally, I can never really wrap words around this, but for some reason, it's much more pleasing to see odd numbers in photographs than even numbers. And had there been 3 sailboats here, I'd say, okay, that's just more visually pleasing. Work with all 3 of them. Because there's not, and because the one that's further away has a few sections on it, kind of right down where the sail meets the purple. I'm not sure what that orange is, if it's just a reflection of light or something. I would probably crop that out. I would just work on the one that's closer to the camera, and you got a nice reflection there.
Yeah, that's good.
And just kind of take it down to one sailboat at a time, and work on that. I think the fact that there's 2 and they're totally different colors and styles, and maybe as a black and white, it's a good way to go, because some of the color cast is a bit of a distraction, especially in the water. It's not just, you got reflections of stuff that you don't see, which battles for your attention.
I think that's a good suggestion. And again, the disclaimer, as when we show these croppings, we don't suggest that you go out and shoot this way. And in fact, in a short while, we're going to share some tips and tricks for getting it right in camera. But we're talking about using these crops to teach you how we think you should shoot this in the future. And so I just threw down, I like the single boat. I think that's a great suggestion. I just threw down a slightly warmer graduated filter across the top just to warm up those tones. I love those reflections. And I might actually do something similar. And I did, overall, I increase the exposure about a stop too, but I'm going to brighten the bottom just a bit to get just a little bit more of that boat reflection in there. But Sue, I will say kudos to getting both complete reflections, not cutting off any of that. That looks very deliberate, and that's always a great thing.
Yep.
All right. Nice. Yeah. I'm going to move on to Kevin's. And we actually, Kevin, aren't sure if you meant to submit this, because you usually give us a very nicely edited PSD. And this seems not to be that.
Did this come in RAW or DNG?
It's a CR2. Yeah, it's a RAW straight out of camera.
At first glance, it doesn't look like, we know Kevin well enough. It just doesn't look like he did any editing here. Upper right corner, definitely get that sky out of there. Tight the way you are. That's a good way to go. And this is, basically you're going to want to do some dehazing, because you want to see the sort of the spray coming off of the ocean and stuff, but some of it's just really hazy in the far back there. You got to be careful with that slider. Just a little bit goes a long way. I think it needs a workup from the beginning. It looks like it hasn't been touched.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I mean, the elements are there to make a great image. It's obviously a beautiful scene. It's just it was just a matter of what you did there, Toby, straightening it up a little bit, straightening the horizon, removing that bit of sky, starts taking it in the right direction, in my opinion.
Yeah, and with a shot like this, it's kind of hard too, because the foreground is blurred out. So when you're shooting like this, you really, if you want to give the viewer a sense that they're standing there on that foreground with you, that needs to be in focus. Now, you don't want to blur out the ocean, obviously, but you got to choose a depth of field that's going to keep that all in focus and get at least the top portion of that, because you can see sticks of grass and stuff that are really close to you that are just completely blurred out. So you're going to have to spend some time in Photoshop and just kind of get those out of there so they don't draw your attention.
Yeah. And things like this little white vehicle traveling along the road back there, we could just kind of clip out real quick to give you some ideas. So as Steve and David were talking, the only things I did was I threw a graduated filter over it. I find myself doing similar things to not only your pictures, but mine as well. I warmed this mist up a little bit to catch a little bit more of that setting sun. I added a little bit more color to the water to make that color pop. You can see hints of it already. I wanted to see a little bit more. And I warmed up this foreground, but I totally agree. I'd love to see that in sharper focus. Okay. Adam has this really cute, about to be hit with a snowball. But it's very bright, Adam.
I like the kind of high key look that he gave it.
Okay.
I mean, it may be a little bright, but I think it looks really good. Boy, you really see her eyes.
Yeah, that's the key there. Yeah, you really see the eyes. I mean, I like this shot a lot. I mean, it's a real moment that was happening. The human element is always, it can really go a lot of different ways. But the smile is genuine. The eyes, you're really seeing all of that popping. The only thing I would maybe do is crop in even tighter. Just bring down the top below the top of her hat. Just really get in, because with portraits like this, I mean, it's obvious she's in the snow, so you don't really need to see much more of the snow just to know that that's where she is. It's cool to see a little bit of the hearts on the hat just to kind of get that context. But yeah, it just in a shot like this, it's almost like the closer in, the better, as long as you're not losing important information, which the gloves with the snow, that's all important. But it's just, there's a thing about really coming in close. One thing I tell people a lot of times is if you watch TV and movies, anything like, in the realm of film or video, look how close they crop in. I mean, just watch something tonight, watch a TV show or a movie, and look how close they get in on faces all the time. And I really think about that a lot when I'm editing a portrait, unless there's some information I really need to show in the portrait, or it's just aesthetically more pleasing to show more of the whole, image, the whole setting that we were in. I think coming in close, especially when the eyes are looking at you like that, it's precious.
Yeah. And Toby, I know you came in, I would come in probably even a little tighter, lose those white portions that are on either side. Because once you notice those, your eye keeps going to them. Yeah, I would.
I'm holding it to 2 to 3 now. I could back that off.
I would just go.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously you got to play around with what looks right as far as the format, but it just really, it doesn't hurt to bring it in super close. Yeah, in my opinion.
Cropped with the graphics on her hat were cut out, because that's all of a sudden something else going on there at the top and just goes off frame. And then I would go into Photoshop and just a couple of the larger strands of hair that are kind of wisping off to the right, I would just probably clip those out, because you want the viewer to stay focused on the hands with the snowball and the eyes. That to me is what's going on in this picture. Everything else is a distraction.
Yeah.
One thing I've been doing a lot on portraits lately is doing the radial gradient, and really doing like a dark radial gradient to where, and bringing it around the face to where it just very subtly, the brightest part of the portion becomes the face. And it with snow, you got to be careful, because it's all very bright when you're out in the snow, but just whatever you can do to like really bring the attention in on that face is very important, I think.
Gotcha.
That looks good.
Yeah.
I really like this shot, because it's just,
there's a connection.
There's absolutely a connection.
Yeah. Nice. I think those are great suggestions. All right, good. We got Chris Bartell, duck.
Wow, that is sharp.
Duck at the pond. It is sharp.
Super sharp. Wow.
Z key zooms us in. Sometimes it takes a second to load, but there it is. Quite nice. A little bit of a reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what I'd have to add. I love that we could see a little bit of the foot in the water, but also in the reflection.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have much to say about this. I would maybe consider doing a much more horizontal crop, though. Obviously, don't cut off the reflection, but that's going to just give it more travel space to the right. It's going to. I would just do free form, so you don't come in from the sides at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, and this might be one where I would want the duck to be dead center. I was talking about this recently with rule of thirds. A lot of times we hone in on rule of thirds so much, but it's not always necessary. Now, granted, it just depends on your preference, but the head will be in the third. So,
and the eye,
yeah. So it's kind of, unless there's some information happening on the right or left that's truly pertinent. I think, I don't know. Sometimes I just like a centered subject.
Yeah. Only other thing I'd suggest is you could come in here with a brush with some noise reduction and a little bit of sharpness down and do that on the water. Because I'm just picking up a little bit of grain, noise in the water. Nothing terrible, but you could just smooth that out a little bit further.
Yeah, you want to be careful because now that we're in tighter, you definitely see kind of the pixelation that happens right where the edges meet the background. And
True.
It's such a fine line between looking very sharp and in focus and then looking kind of artificial and over sharpened. So, just be really careful of that. I know Toby's got some really great tricks in Photoshop using Gaussian blur and stuff like that to kind of soften edges. But my suspicion here is that the clarity or the sharpness was just turned up a little too much. I think if you back it off, it'll look a little bit more natural.
Yep. Yeah, I love the bill is just really so clean and crisp looking. Yeah. Really nice. Really nice.
It's very, very beautiful image.
We got time for one more, and I see a new name is right here, so I want to grab this one and give it a little bit of time. Plus, it's also a beautiful location. Sean, thank you so much for submitting.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So for me, I would. Again, go to crop, and I would do free form. I'd come in from the right and take out all that bushy stuff that's over there. Okay, come back out. Keep those two tall trees on kind of the edge, maybe just a little bit more. And then on the left side, I'd come in. I don't know that you really need to come in much. I definitely wouldn't get rid of that tree. It's
a nice framing element.
Yeah.
Actually come back out just a little bit, Toby, show a little bit more of that. And then I would eliminate the tree at the bottom because it's cool, but it frames it in a little too much. And if you do this, you're going to feel way less boxed in, and you're going to feel like this water is just kind of running on for forever and ever. Or you see what I mean?
Yep. Yep.
That first tree at the bottom was like a blatant visual stopping point. You can't not look at it, and every time you want to look at El Capitan here, you're constantly just going down and feeling like you're tripping over that giant that was right in front of you. So I like where he was going with it, but this is the way that I would crop the image.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, if you have to leave the bottom tree, and I would think you just would want to come in on the crop a little bit. I mean, it seemed like it was too much on the bottom, but I do think this is a stronger image.
Yeah.
I do like having the tree on the left too. I agree.
Yeah. I think it's a nice framing element, and you've done a nice job of your depth of field here. You chose F22 so that everything does appear in focus. Maybe if we zoom in, we might find this mountain's not quite as sharp. No, it looks great. And so that's great. This isn't some out of focus element. Thoughts on this bit of stick or branch, broken branch?
I would just crop down from the top just slightly so it looks like it just continues on off the bit. It doesn't just end. Watch cutting off that tree though on the right.
Yeah, that's better. I mean, you could remove that branch, but it kind of like just 6 1/2 dozen or the other. I think just doing what you did helps.
Yeah. And then I just wonder if we just warm up down in the shadows just a tiny bit and a little brighter. But I think that's really, really nice. And the light on this, you get this in Yosemite for sometimes. It looks like almost a clear blue sky day, but I think there's just a little bit of soft clouds diffusing the light, and just makes for it's a giant softbox lighting up your portrait of El Cap there.
This is a great shot. I really, the more I'm looking at it, I'm like, I mean, the brightest subject is El Capitan. That's what you're really taking a photo of here, but you're saying like, I saw it through the woods. I saw it from this vantage point.
Yeah. Toby, do me a favor and do a graduate filter coming in from the left side. I want to lighten the shadows of those trees, so that, you know, not overly lighten them, but just so that you kind of see the detail in them a little bit more. And you got to be careful, because I just felt like they were a little too dark, but you also don't want to lighten them too much that they start to compete with El Cap.
Yep. Yeah.
This is what's done here. This is kind of a trick that I use in real estate photography all the time. I'll include, you know, part of a door jamb or something on the edge of the frame, and there's a bunch of layers. If you're by a door jamb, you've got, you know, you look at it from the side, and there's like 4 or 5 different layers before you enter the room, and you include some of that, and it's really cool for the viewer, an understanding of where they're standing and how one room opens up to another room. And that's
much better sense of place of
exactly.
Cool. All right.
Nice. Very nice.
We have several more really good images. I'm sorry, we're going to cut it from here though, so that we can keep the show at a reasonable length. We will get to those in our next show, if not sooner sometime. So thank you so much to those who submitted. If you're watching this and you didn't submit, please consider doing that in the future. We'd love to give you some tips and tricks and some Lightroom education in this part of it. Brady Bunch. And if you are not a pen member and you'd like to submit, well, continue taking advantage of that. And also, Gareth, I saw you're outside the U.S. and that Groupon is U.S. only. Send me a message. Let me see if I can make some magic happen. I don't want to keep somebody from being able to join at a deal just because of a Groupon's stupid rules. Those aren't our rules. So send me a message and we'll see what we can do about that.
Cool.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. We're going to talk in a second about tips for getting it right in camera, or maybe we should just dive into it. Or do you want to know, first off, I mentioned this last week, I bought used on B&H the Mavic 2 Pro.
Nice.
As many of you know, I've been flying it for the past year off and on, but that was all loans to me by DJI. It was very nice of them to loan it to me for so long. And with enough trips this year, and with the rumor looking pretty solidly that a new Mavic 2 or a new Mavic Pro is not coming out, I thought I should buy it. B&H had a couple of used versions, one listed as 9+ quality for $300 less than this sells new. And I thought, I'll give it a try. It arrived with its stickers still on it. It was brand new. You could tell somebody held it here with kind of a greasy hand a little bit, but otherwise...
Unacceptable.
Otherwise, it was absolutely perfect, and I don't think it ever flew. There was one picture, actually, you know, I tease things and then I'm not fully prepared to talk about them. There was one picture in the device that caught my attention. Somebody had used it to take a picture. There it is. It's like a guy's foot in his house. The B&H bag, you can actually still see in the background, along with a pill bottle that you can kind of read his name.
Oh my gosh.
I don't know if I should be upset at B&H or if this guy, poor guy, should be upset at B&H, but clearly he bought it, took it out in his house, took a picture with it, and for whatever reason thought, I don't know, maybe his wife came home, a partner, and is like, what's that thing? Take it back. And now I have it.
There you go.
Hands greasy with McDonald's French fries.
Yeah, that would be great if there was, like, you know, a Burger King or McDonald's there. He's got a lot of shoes right there, a basketball, and I can't quite tell what medicine is in that pill bottle also sitting on the floor. I don't know, why do you keep a pill bottle on the floor though? Why is that the place?
Why is that in your shot? Your one shot with your Mavic. Oh my gosh. Hey, but you know what? Just to your point though, I mean, I talk about used gear all the time. I mean, like, there's so much stuff to be had out there that you don't have to spend full price on.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you first showed that, I thought, man, that takes some guts to buy a used drone. Because I'm a huge advocate for used lenses. I typically tell people I don't suggest buying used electronics. Now,
yeah, absolutely.
Came out and, it's hardly been used. That's one thing. But a camera that's 2 or 3 years old,
right?
No, just save your money, go buy something else. But glass is glass. A drone is super risky, I would think, to buy used, because I saw Toby fly one into Croatia. At the end of the day, it came out seemingly unscathed, but no. But that's impressive. I'm proved wrong.
Well, here's my thinking on that. I agree. I was a little nervous about it, but $300 savings was a chunk. I'm kind of bummed I didn't buy when all the Black Friday deals. There was a Black Friday deal, and then just after holidays, it was down to about that price new.
Yeah.
But which made it harder to say, oh, I'm going to spend new. But because B&H is reliable, I've never had an issue with them. And I feel like if I had anything, my plan was to get it, open it, check it, fly it a couple of times, and if anything seemed funny, I'd send it back, and I knew that B&H would be like, okay, you get your return.
They've been amazing for that kind of thing. I actually bought a lens one time from B&H used, and traveled with it for a couple of weeks. And 45 days after I bought it, I was kind of like, I'm not sure I really want to keep this lens. And before I decided to sell it, I just thought I would ask. It never hurts to. I asked B&H. I called and said, is there anything you can do? I'll pay a restocking fee, whatever, to just return it. I know it's past the 30 days. They returned it, no restocking fee. And I'm not saying go return stuff 45 days later, but it was just the amount of the customer service that they offered me for that was tremendous. I mean, and it was in fantastic shape. I just didn't know that I loved it, So
yeah.
You just reminded me. I had bought an iPad from there a while right before the Vietnam trip, Toby, and I had it for 60 days. And I bought a 512 gigabyte, and I wish I had bought a bigger one, or I bought a 256. I wish I had the 512. I don't remember, but I sent him an email and just said, hey, I think I bought one that's just a little too small. I know it's outside of your exchange policy. Is there anything I could do to just exchange it? And same kind of thing. Like, I understand if there's a restocking fee. And they wrote me right back, like, immediately. Nope. Go ahead and send it to us, and we'll ship out a bigger one. I ended up not doing that.
Cool.
It didn't. I ended up keeping the iPad just to read on rather than edit. I went back to my laptop. So I didn't take advantage of it, but still, it doesn't ask. And they're great, man. I can't.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I do earn a little credit as a B&H affiliate with used gear. So if you go to photorec.tv/BH photo, it'll redirect, and you will make me some money. Check out their used, as we all have these experiences, very, very positive of B&H photo. I'm quite happy. I was going to add something else about that, but I don't remember what. It makes me want to leave a picture on every camera I send back to them. Just
there you go.
Somebody with my business card or something, like weather balloons. Have you found this camera? Did you buy this camera? That also happened when I bought the Sony A7R II from Best Buy. It came with a camera card, an 8 gigabyte card in it, and a picture of the store employees being goofy.
Awesome.
But, fun stuff. Okay. So look, we love post-processing. We think that's an important part of the story, but we want to counter that with a nice discussion of some tips and tricks for getting it right in camera. Because yes, post-processing is part of the story, but one, that doesn't fix a crappy picture, or doesn't, automatically make a picture that it has multiple things wrong with it just beautiful and perfect. So we really want to give you some strategies for things to think about and get it right while you're out there in the field. Who would like to start?
I'll go ahead and start.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve. My dog's barking, so I'm going to wait till she calms down.
I'll tell Lottie I said hi. She probably hears my voice.
That's what it is. She's smitten with you.
Yeah.
She really is passionate about getting it right in camera.
Yeah, exactly.
So whenever I visit Carr's house, I'm Lottie's little boyfriend. She
oh, absolutely. She loves you, Steve.
Okay, so getting it right in camera. This is something that I have a lot of experience with, especially in real estate photography. When I first started my business, I was trained by a guy that did just a ridiculous amount of work getting it right in camera for the shoot. He would use lighting, he'd run extension cords. It was this whole process. It took forever. And I learned a ton, but it kind of taught me more of what I didn't want to do. I felt like clients whose homes I was shooting, I needed to be as efficient and quick as possible, not get in their way too much, move things around, put them all back when I'm done, and then get out of there and fix it all in post-processing. So there was a lot of shooting that I did, and the mentality was, oh, there's a hose over there. I forgot about that, but I'll just fix it in post-processing, that kind of thing. And what I learned is that it drove me nuts because it was such a time suck. I was constantly fixing things. And more importantly, I wasn't paying close attention to the things that really mattered, like the proper angle in the room, what the lighting looked like, where the lines led, and what the story, I talk about this all the time, the story of your picture. Each room had some story that I wanted to convey to the customers looking to buy the house. And so the more work that I could do to get it right in the camera, in post-processing, all I had to do was fix exposure and stuff because all the angles were right and the distortion was corrected as much as I could do in camera. And so for me, getting it right in camera really made me think about how I was shooting and how the story was going to be told. And I think that at the end of the day is critically important to every photograph that you make, because that's me as an artist. That's what I want to do with my photography, is tell a story. So
that's good.
Yeah.
Nice. Cool. I go next.
Sure.
And thank you, Steve. Two things that I can share. They're both pretty simple, and you know, one is kind of what Steve was saying, but I'm saying it is important. And a lot of landscape photography, when you set up, there might be that branch or that stick or a couple of funky colored leaves down in the shot. And I call it pre-shopping. I don't hesitate to take some time to move those things. Now, I do, as you know, a green member of the Green Party, I do want you to be very careful out there. You don't go breaking sticks or twigs off. If those are attached to the tree and in your composition, then you need to adjust your composition. But if it's just a dead stick laying on the ground or a couple of leaves, go ahead and move those out of the way and take that time to study those shots as you create them, to look for anything that might be distracting that you can move out of the way. It really can make a huge, huge difference, because yes, Photoshop has that amazing content aware fill, but you know, if you don't have to do that, why do it? And there are times where in some situations that takes a lot of time and effort to make it look natural. And if you can avoid that, then you're just going to be that much better off. Mm-hmm. And my other tip is really nothing to do with landscape, although in some ways, yes. I learned this as I started to shoot weddings, in the informal situations that I was shooting, cocktail hour and the interactions of, you know, the guests and some of the getting ready stuff. And that is, don't be afraid to move your subjects to better light. There is no post-processing really that's going to fix crappy light situations. That's right. And gosh, man, if somebody is standing right under an incandescent and it's giving them serious raccoon eyes, have them take 2 steps back. So you start to take a picture and you notice it and you say, oh, excuse me, come forward a little bit. Or would you just take a step back? The light's a little bit better. Nobody cares. They're all totally fine with that. Nobody ever was like, no, this is where I'm standing and sipping my cranberry cocktail. No, they move. And then you get such a better picture. Yeah. Or spin them around if it's an outdoor situation and they're being, you know, directly lit or side lit. Put them fully in the sun or fully backlit, whatever is going to work best for that light situation, and you're going to be in such better shape. And it was a nervousness on my part early on to be like, I'm just supposed to be taking these pictures. Nobody notices me. But then you look at picture after picture and go, oh, I got to fix this one. Oh, I got to fix this one. Oh, I can't even do anything with that one. And it's a waste of your time. So get them to move a little bit. As I said, nobody cares.
Yeah, and the irony is, by telling them where to go, you actually look more confident, like you know what you're doing anyway. So here it is. you're nervous about it, but actually giving direction, telling people what to do, does nothing but build your confidence over time. You just got to get beyond ourselves in these things.
Yeah,
that's right.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool. All right.
Well, I would say to that, I mean, we live in a day and age where like the technology is so incredible that we can actually, you actually can do things in post processing that would have blown people's minds, just 20 years ago. Let alone 100 years ago when photography was like, kind of just really coming into its own. And so, and coming from the world of music where I was for 24 years, when we first started recording albums, we were recording on 2-inch magnetic tape, and it was going by, with motors and across tape heads, and you had to play the part right. You had to play it right. And we could go and fix a couple things, but for the most part, you had to play it right. You had to play it in time. You had to play it with the right feel. And then came digital, and we could fix all kinds of stuff. But that the impetus to play it right did not go away, at least not for me. And I would sometimes play a part in a studio situation, and they'd be like, "Well, that's good enough. That's fine." And I'd say, "No, it's not good enough. It's not fine. It needs to be better. I know I can play that better." And I was amazed what they could do to fix it, but it never felt right when they would just fix a crappy part. It felt great when I played it well. And so I translate that over to photography. Yes, it's incredible what we can do in post-processing in Lightroom and Photoshop and all these other filters and things we can do. But if you get it right in the camera, at least for the most part, at least, as right as you possibly can, there's nothing that replaces that. Even white balance. We can all fix white balance. Yes. Mm-hmm. But when it's working so well and you load it and you're like, wow, it already looks awesome. The confidence that I'll give you, and then also just the finished product is going to be that much better. You're not trying to like sharpen something that's a little dull. You're not trying to, you're not having to like crop the heck out of something just because you didn't stand in the right place. And it's, I can tell you from the tours we do, and you guys can both attest to this, but like from the tours we do, sometimes we're in situations where it is what it is. Like we're not going to be able to move to this other spot. It just, you can't. So you do the best you can with what you've got. But I do encourage people not to think about so much about like, oh, I can fix that later. Because the more you say that, a lot of stuff you're not going to fix later, and then you're going to have a really hard time fixing it later. And it's so much better when you just get it right. There's a sweet spot. And
yeah, good point, David. I mean, if you think about a tour, let's say you're out there for 4 days and you're shooting 200 photographs each day with us. Mm-hmm. And on 50% of those, you're saying, well, I'll just fix it later. Okay, so, I mean, of course, you're going to call through. You're not going to keep everything. But by the time you get home, you've got, say, 500 I'll fix it laters.
Yeah.
You remember exactly what that was. Yeah. I did a tutorial on white balance recently where I talked about, I was in New Zealand and I was shooting the sunset. And I shot, I knew the colors, it was warm, I knew what I wanted to do with the photo, I had it all figured out. And it was about halfway through our trip, and I shot it on auto white balance. Well, what happened? I got home and I put all the photos in the computer and I pulled that one up, and auto white balance, it was like very blue and cool, and I wanted it to be warmer and stuff. Yeah. And so I couldn't totally remember what my vision was when I was shooting. I remembered that I had a vision when I was shooting it. Yeah. But I remember exactly what I wanted to do with it. So had I changed my white balance to be as accurate as I planned the photo to be when I got home, then when I got home with 2,000 photographs to go through, it would be a reminder that, okay, I have my starting point. Yeah. So yeah, it's great. And to Toby's point, that I love the analogy of pre-shopping.
Yes, absolutely.
Use cooking and going to the grocery store and stuff a lot frequently as an analogy for photography. You're not going to go to the grocery store and just wander the aisles and just start throwing stuff into your shopping. You can do that, but it's certainly not very good for you or your health or your pocketbook.
Right.
Have a list and a plan and be intentional about what you're doing there to get those ingredients, to get those photographs. And then when you go home and you make a meal, you know exactly what you're planning to do with what you have.
And I will say this too, when you're getting paid to do photography when it's your job, you owe it to yourself and to your family and to everyone, all your other clients, to do as much as you can to get it right in camera. Because one example, very quickly, I did a shoot this past fall, and it was a family shoot, an extended family. So it was all the like siblings and grandchildren and all this, big family shoot. And we were shooting on basically the stage of a church in this kind of like chapel building. And there were like microphone cables everywhere in the back. Mm-hmm. And at one point I was like, I probably should move those. And I was like, it'll be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hours and hours later of photoshopping out microphone cables on every single shot. I was like, man, it would have taken me 5 minutes to move all that.
Yeah.
And instead it took me 5 hours to edit it out of 40 shots. So
skills to be able to edit it out. What if you're, just learning Photoshop or you don't use it at all?
Right. There's no way I would have. Yeah.
Live with those cords back there, and so
right.
It would drive you nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe think of it this way. If you imagine if you were shooting video, so we have very much, although those tools are coming, we have much less ability to do heavy fixing, unless you're going frame by frame. And that's just going to be ridiculous. So think about it. Say, all right, what do I need to do to really set this shot up? And again, now you were limited in that situation, David Carr, but for so many of us, if you could move your subject a little left or right to hide something in the background,
right. Yeah.
Or just to avoid that being in the background, that's another opportunity as well to kind of do your
absolutely
your pre-work.
Yeah.
Pre-work. Yeah. But Steve, every time I go to the grocery store, I go starving. And so I just really, I walk down the aisles like this, just.
Yeah, I know. It's a terrible time to go to the grocery store.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Hey, if you appreciated those tips, give this a quick thumbs up if you're still watching. And I just appreciate that. Thanks, guys, for coming up with those. We'll have lots more. Let's dive back into a couple of news stories. One that caught my eye last week. Focal 2. Focal is that software that allows you to set up your Nikon or Canon DSLR, and it does automatic micro focus adjustments if your Canon or Nikon DSLR supports that, which means that it makes sure that your lens is aligned perfectly with your sensor and the focusing system, because as you know, DSLR's focusing system is up here and the sensor is here, and sometimes those things can get out of alignment a little bit. It caught my eye the other day that they had a release that updated for the Z50. And I thought, wait a second, it's the mirrorless camera. The sensor and the focusing are the same. And so I started reading a little bit, and this isn't new. They started talking about this back in the Z7Z, that, there are multiple focusing methods still with these mirrorless systems, and the phase detection, which is looking at the light coming in, can actually still be slightly out of alignment. Now, part of me wants to call BS a little bit, because they go through this blog post, with mirrorless here. Let's share this screen again. And they find that it is off by 1, which on a scale of 1 to 20, I would really see. You can see here, it should be there and it should be there. And then down here, you can see that it should be right on the center line, and you can see that it's up there. I would challenge you that the eye, even at 100%, probably could not determine a difference.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But if this is something to think about, if you feel like, I know there's so many variables, people write us all the time and are like, hey, this stuff is out of focus. And almost always it's the gear that they think is the issue, when it's usually some other variables that are them or myself. And so this is a solution if you want to kind of double check. If you don't feel like you're getting the results you want from your setup, even if it is mirrorless, you can run it through Focal and get some feedback on that. Yes, even the EOS R is listed as well. And, I've been asked about that before. I think there was a workshop we were about to head out on, and people get to ask questions before we go out. And somebody said, hey, I see I have micro adjustments in my Sony. Should I be looking at that? The ones in the Sony menu are only if you're using their adapter that puts a mirror in there. And then, of course, the focusing system can be out of alignment because it's being bounced around by the mirror. There is none of Focal's works with the Sony system. And I don't know why, if it does with these other mirrorless cameras. Mm-hmm. So I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to bring it up.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like I should have more of an answer if I'm bringing something up, but I don't.
Well, it's kind of rhetorical. It's just, what do you think about this? I mean, there is a lot of splitting of hairs within photography. Obviously, if you follow any kind of forums or gear reviews, there is a lot of splitting of hairs, and it's weird because I say this all the time. It's not that they don't matter. It's not that those details don't matter. That it's all just superfluous. But like, I think when people will kind of use that as like the thing that will hold them back from being creative. I just, when I did the podcast last week with Tanya Wilhelm, we talked about that, just that, she kind of just goes out and shoots. She's not so worried about all the gear all the time. And I could have this sharper lens or that. It's just sort of like, I have an idea, I want to go create it. And I have a lot of admiration for that approach, because I know that my tendency is to want to like always be in pursuit of the best gear, the sharpest lens, the whatever. And it's just this balance. It's not that it doesn't matter. It's just that it should never trump just going and being good at what you do.
Yeah. Well, I go back and forth on this a lot because, when I test gear, I look pretty critically at how sharp is it? How does it compare to other things? I'm really looking kind of more to answer the question of value. And I think you've heard me say this before, and other people have as well.
Yeah.
Some people are like, well, that lens, its corners aren't very sharp. Or for example, the difference in the corners between the 20 and the 20 Sony and the 20 Tamron is very significant. And my answer to that usually is corner softness of a lens has never ruined one of my pictures. I mean, I ruin my pictures long before corner softness does.
That's a good way to put
not
it,
capturing the right moment or choosing the wrong setting for that shot.
Right.
That's not to say that that I think the Tamron is the better lens in all cases because it's cheaper and smaller. If I'm going to shoot stars, then, well, I probably do want it to be very sharp all the way out to the corners. But for general photography, how much does that corner sharpness really impact your photography?
Exactly.
So,
that's a great way to put it.
I don't know. But again, you always want the value. I was reminded when I started searching for a new like running watch, like so many options. Which one is going to give me the best bang for my dollar? And that's where we can really start to get into all of these discussions. So.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it gets exacerbated, I feel, with technology and products changing and progressing so quickly.
Yes.
Because you finally make a decision, you've done your research, and you're going to spend money on something. And then the other fear is, okay, 6 months from now, is this going to be considered almost obsolete because they come out with something that's twice as good? And that's kind of frustrating to deal with. I think we got, buyer's remorse. The time frame for buyer's remorse just keeps getting stretched out. It used to be, okay, well, I made this purchase and I shouldn't have, and I can't afford it or whatever. Now it's just like 6 months later, you're going, oh gosh, why didn't I just wait? And that's a shame. I don't have an answer for it, but I want to jump on the bandwagon to say, don't get yourself too wrapped up in this stuff. I have known like you said, with the tours that we do, we see a lot of different people approaching photography from a lot of different angles. And I have a hard time relating to the folks that are just total gearheads. Now, I like nice gear, but when it comes to really analyzing corner sharpness and all that other stuff, I could quite honestly care less. You need to talk to Toby about that stuff.
Yeah, I don't like it as much as I should as a reviewer. So I stayed away from that too, for the most part, and I try to give a fair and balanced review of all of the pieces of it, but without getting too technical.
Yeah, I think you do a really great job of that, of just giving people the technical to the point that they need it, and then moving on from that to the point where it's like, look, because a lot of it for me is, how does something feel? I mean, when I rave about a piece of gear, it's just because something just feels really good to shoot with. It's just when I use this lens, when I use this camera body, I don't know. It just it invokes confidence in me, and it makes me feel like I'm doing a good job.
Yeah.
So.
Nice. Yeah. And then of course, there's the Tamron is smaller and lighter, to just use these as an example. So for some people that might outweigh corner sharpness.
Exactly.
Corner sharpness isn't the end all be all for everybody. Yeah. And I put Roy's comment up. 90% of the time when people have blurry or out of focus pictures, the slow shutter speed. Yeah, that is very, very true.
I'm still guilty of that. Still,
I
to
am
this
too.
day.
I am too. That was a main goal of mine last year, was to make less stupid mistakes. One of them being to really basically always nail my shutter speed, or at least be smarter about it. And I'd say I made less, but I still made mistakes last year. So it happens.
Well, at the wedding I shot last week, I used a 70 to 200 for most of the time, and a lot of times I totally the whole idea of doubling your focal length in your shutter speed like just went out the window. I would be like at 1/80th of a second at 200 millimeters. But I mean, most of the shots turned out good. But I just was like, wait, what was I thinking? So.
Yeah, you can get away with that sometimes.
So yeah, I mean, it's amazing what we can.
What I do with zoom lenses is I take whatever, and you guys may do the same thing. I'll take whatever the longest focal length is. So let's say it's a 70 to 200. I'll take 200, and I'll just say, okay, my shutter speed has to be 400th of a second or faster. So I'll pretty much, if the light's going down, I'll just set it at 400, and then just start tweaking with my ISO if I have to.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't care that 70 to 200 range, doing the math on anything in between there. I'll just take the longest.
Right. Yeah.
And then I'll just fix it in post.
Well, exactly. There you go. That's what I recommend. I will say this, and I don't mean to be long-winded on this, but I will say this. In this, like, one reason I took over 3,000 shots at this wedding was I put my camera. It was my Z6 was what I used predominantly for the whole time, and I put it in high-speed burst.
Oh yeah.
And I just fired away because I really wanted to see what the autofocus, the eye detection, and obviously this wasn't animal eye detection, but I just wanted to really test the limits of that. And man, I came away with a lot of keeper shots. And yes, most of them are at ISO 6400, and I don't care one bit because they're sharp and they were recoverable. And it was such a win. So
nice. That's great. So that's great feedback. That is the newest firmware that they released. Yes. Yeah, that is awesome to hear that.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. It worked out well.
Good. Last question I have for you guys: is photographing kids at the park creepy? So here's the story. And this kind of hit home a little bit. What's her name? Hilary Duff. Let's share the screen here. We're going to go to Marie Claire for this breaking news. Marie Claire, first time we ever shared that on the show. Hilary Duff. No, we don't want that ad. Hilary Duff confronts a creepy photographer for taking pictures of her son's friends playing in the park. I think it was a soccer game. And she saw this guy taking pictures of the kids. Now, what were they playing? Oh, they were playing football. Maybe it was just like a pickup game, not an actual. And this guy's out there photographing him. Her son was 7. So these are younger kids. And she decided to confront the man, asked him to stop and record. She said, paparazzi shooting kids. And she went up to him. I actually haven't watched this video. I read the transcript. He basically says, hey, I'm just practicing using my camera. It seems pretty straightforward. And she's like, it's super creepy. He's like, it's a public park. I'm allowed to be here. And she's like, it's super creepy. I'm calling the police. Called the police. The police came and they said, what do you want us to do? It's totally fine. There's no laws against this.
Yeah.
So, here Hilary Duff, she kind of, publicly with her 14 million followers, shamed this guy and said, creep, laws need to change. This is stalking minors. Disgusting. So you guys have opinions?
Well, I think somebody like Hilary Duff, it's Hilary Duff, you said?
Yeah.
She's a public figure, so you're always going to be on the lookout for that kind of thing, and you're going to be probably a little more paranoid than the average person. So I get that. Having said that, though, I would think that was totally creepy. I go to football games to watch my grandson play, and I take a bunch of pictures, and he's got a couple best friends, and we know their parents. So I'll take pictures of some of his teammates while they're playing too, and then I'll take those pictures and give them to the parents. But just for the parents and for the kids to have those.
Of course. You have a relationship with them. Yeah.
Anybody else on the team, it's a football game, so you're going to have pictures of other kids, but I'm not intentionally shooting other kids. I think that is creepy to me.
Yeah, it's like, I agree. Like I would just never do that. I'm so sensitive to that, and it's not because it was a public park. He is quote allowed to do that, but I just think now, and obviously, like you said, Hillary Duff. I mean, this is someone who is used to the paparazzi kind of thing and is probably very sensitive to cameras being pointed in her direction or anybody related to her. So there's probably a heightened sense of, just being aware of that. But at the same time, like I was sitting on a plane last year, can't remember where I was flying, but it doesn't matter. And the guy next to me, this older gentleman, was leaning over me very uncomfortably, taking a picture of the baby across the aisle that this woman was feeding a bottle to. And he wasn't related. And I was just like, what are you doing, man? Like, why are you taking? And he's like, yeah, I love babies. And I'm just like, dude, that's not right. Like, just have some sense. Like, it was just weird. And I just thought, and I am so sensitive to that as a photographer. If I'm anywhere with my camera and there are kids, I'm like, I really want to make it obvious that I'm not pointing my camera at, unless it's people that I know and they are okay with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, from the standpoint, he wasn't doing anything wrong, but
right.
Especially that age too, is definitely on the younger side.
Yeah.
And why I said this kind of hit close to home to me is because I often have cameras and I would love to test out continuous autofocus. And I'm very careful not to go down to there's a soccer field, lacrosse field, baseball field, really close here. But I've really only done that when it's been a parent's a friend's kid playing, so that the parent knew me. I'm with that parent, and it's kind of all okay. Or just go find a game of pick up flag football or something where you got 20-something-year-olds that are playing. There are other places to practice than on 7-year-olds.
Well, that's right there. There's plenty of other. I mean, I think that should the laws change? No, I don't. But I'm a small government guy. I don't want a bunch of laws. If somebody's being shamed in the court of public opinion because you're feeling protective over your child, look, that's just kind of the world we live in right now. And yeah, it can be bullying, I suppose, which I am fairly sensitive to. But you know what? That's kind of the price you pay for doing something creepy. Yeah, it's not a law. It doesn't mean you should do it.
Yeah.
Get tipped off with a guy who's using FaceTime next to me in a doctor's office. I'm not necessarily going to shame that person, but he's fully in his legal right to do that. But come on, people.
Yeah, there's just some kind of spatial awareness and just having common sense that I just don't. I think it just escapes people. And I noticed he was using a Nikon, so.
You Nikon guys, you're just creepy, just using them. Yeah. He was probably testing out that new firmware.
That's honestly what it was. It was a Z. I could tell that it was a Z.
Yeah.
I don't know which one.
So John says, maybe ask a couple parents standing around if they mind. Yeah, that you could do that. They probably would be like, yeah, get away, and then you should listen to them. Another alternative might be to be totally upfront. Hey, I'm testing this new camera. I've done that with kids at a skate park before. They were in their teens. This was actually part of a Sony event, so it was kind of all sanctioned. But these kids were just elsewhere. They were like, "Yeah, man, take some pictures," and then say, "Hey, I'll give you any good ones," or here's my card, here's my email. Be really straight up front about it. I went to fly this drone yesterday up at the school after school was out and on the playground, or not the playground, but the big field, and no one was there. So I was like, this is good. No one's going to bother me, because I'm always a little worried when I fly the drone. Soon as it's up, 2 little girls and their mom come out with their dog. And I was bracing myself for like, oh, what are you guys doing? And so they wanted to see what it could see. And I showed them. And then I pointed, you could see my house in the shot. I just wanted them to know I lived right there in the area. I wasn't some weirdo. And then they were like, our dog really likes drones. And I'm like, do you mean he'll try to eat it when I land it? They're like, yeah. I was like, okay, all right. So then the mom, like when I was done, the mom distracted the dog with a ball and I landed it real quick. It was fun. But I am testing out the new smart controller, which is that bigger one, the bigger DJI controller with a screen built in. Oh, that's nice. You kind of like negate some of the fantastic portability of the Mavic 2. But holy moly, it is a bright, beautiful screen, and it's all just ready to go so fast. I hate how much I struggle to get this camera or the phone into the case and all of that stuff when I try to fly that way. But so, yeah. Okay, we're going to wrap up the show. We got one question from Kevin. He's shooting with a Sony a7 III, mostly landscapes. Would I recommend this new Sony or the Tamron 17-28? Kevin, what you just came on the New England trip. Do you have the Southwest trip on your radar? I don't think you've done that. If you have, I mean, well, here, let's open up this question to both of you. I know you're not shooting Sony, but a 20mm prime versus a 17-28 focal length lens. What do you think?
Aperture is the same?
No, the 20 is a 1.8. The 17-28 is a 2.8. So, it can be kind of considered like, would you do the 16-35 versus a prime like a 20 or something, or something?
Yeah, that's a good question, Kevin. I don't know. I think the most bang for your buck and the one you'll probably get the more use out of would be the one with the range.
Yeah.
But I really have enjoyed shooting primes again. I started doing that a lot more lately. I'm a big fan of that. I like moving my feet. I like something that's forcing me to think about things, be more intentional, and work for the shot. So yeah, it's a hard one for me to answer. It's a great question.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is. I think Robert's asking a kind of a follow-up question that's great. I would say, he said, use the Sony for Astro, but do you need the 1.8 for landscape? Probably not. Yeah. So how much Astro are you doing? If it's a good bit, then the 20 might be worthwhile. But otherwise, the versatility of that 17-28 is nice to have in a slot canyon, or just to make sure you get that really wide at times.
Yeah. If it's mostly landscape you're doing, you definitely don't need that 1.8.
Yeah.
Especially on the super wide, because you're
absolutely
on things that are probably right by you, and you don't want to go that shallow on your depth of field.
Yeah. Kevin's going on the Southwest tour. I think that 17-28 would be very nice to have.
Yeah, and you're still at 2.8, so you still get a lot of light coming in.
Yep.
Granted, there's a good difference between 2.8 and 1.8, but for me, that's noticed more in something like star shooting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
or if,
absolutely.
Maybe you're doing portraiture or something, but I wouldn't be doing much portraiture with a 20mm lens.
Right.
So yeah, I think that probably does answer the question, sort of.
Yep.
I will say, I do think when you have a wide angle lens, the only time you really need a super wide aperture is going to be the astrophotography. I mean, because I do shoot, like I said, I shoot the 14-24 and I do some portraits with it, but it's not like, I don't consider it a portrait lens. Like there are certain situations where I'm doing portraits and I'm like, there's a really great setting here. Let's put you in the dead center and shoot it with this lens. And I'm going to still shoot it like f8 or f5.6. I mean, there's no depth of field kind of situation there where I'm trying to like capitalize on it.
Yeah.
So I just think, yeah, I mean, you're not going to use a 20mm 1.8 to shoot the Grand Canyon unless it's the stars at the Grand Canyon. Typically, I just don't think that would be a thing.
Yeah, no, I think well said. Yep. Cool. Good. We're done. Bye, everybody.
We're done. Adios.
Hey, David Carr, thank you so much for hanging out. It's great. This 3-person version of Mish Mash is the best it's ever been. And I really appreciate your time.
Fun. I enjoy it.
If you appreciated their time, look down below this video. You can find links to follow Steve on Facebook, Instagram, David Carr on Instagram, and his photography podcast, which if you're watching this, you should also be interested in that because it's full of great content. And you can listen to it in the car without worrying about crashing because there's nothing to see. It's just good.
That's right.
It's just good ear content. So
right. Thank you.
Good. All right. In chat room, thank you so much for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it. We appreciate your comments and your thoughtful opinions about stuff. This is a fantastic community, both inside and outside of Penn. If you're not part of Penn on the inside, you should consider joining. Photorec.tv/Penn for accessing all of that fantastic content and getting regular feedback from professional photographers. And again, thank you to Squarespace for supporting this show and my channel. You can save 10% off your first purchase by going to squarespace.com/PhotorecTV. Their new 7.1 platform makes it super dummy simple to make a beautiful portfolio website where you display your work as it should be, without any compression or without knowing that the person looked at a picture right before you with some political ad that got them all fired up, and then there's your beautiful landscape, but they can't enjoy it because they're all still fired up and they just scroll on by. No, you want to control your photos and what's around them. Squarespace is a great place to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks, guys.
All
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Steve.
Bye-bye.